Welcome in. It is really great to have you here with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
We've put together a highly custom-tailored deep dive just for you today. We know you're the kind of person who wants the really thorough, fascinating details of a subject without getting bogged down in all the informational noise.
Right. Skipping the fluff and getting straight to the good stuff.
Exactly. And today we are looking at a truly remarkable piece of history. We're analyzing the Marine Workers Industrial Union, or the MWIU.
Which was this massive, globe-spanning maritime union.
Yeah, but get this. It existed for only 5 incredibly chaotic years, from 1930 to 1935.
It is a phenomenal subject to explore. We're pulling all of our insights today from a dense, but frankly, heavily detailed Wikipedia article about the union.
And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the incredible story of how rank-and-file dockhands and sailors became, well, the frontline soldiers in a massive international geopolitical conflict.
But before we jump into the timeline, we do need to set some ground rules for you.
Yeah, very important ones. The history we are looking at today involves intensely politically charged movements. I mean, we are going to be discussing the Communist Party USA, Joseph Stalin, and the USSR.
So we want to be explicitly clear with you right up front. We're remaining strictly impartial.
Strictly impartial. We are not taking sides, and we are certainly not endorsing any political ideology.
Not at all. Our role today is simply to act as your guides, reporting the fascinating historical facts exactly as they appear in the historical records we're working from. Nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, let's unpack this. The narrative really sparks to life with a man named George Mink.
Right.
In 1927, Mink, who is an active member of the Communist Party USA, the CPUSA, travels to the USSR.
He makes this journey specifically to attend the 4th Congress of an organization called the Profintern.
And he comes back to the United States with a very clear directive.
To organize American Maritime Workers.
Exactly. He returns as the Profintern's representative for a group called the Transport Workers International Committee for Propaganda and Agitation.
Which gives us our first major acronym of the day, the TWICPNA.
Yeah, get ready for an acronym avalanche.
Oh, absolutely. That era of labor organizing is defined by a highly calculated organizational pipeline that often looks like, well, like an alphabet soup to modern eyes.
It really does. But we don't need you to memorize every single letter.
No, but it is crucial to understand how these groups evolved. So Mink starts with the TWICPNA. Then he begins working alongside William Z. Foster.
And Foster runs the Trade Union Educational League, the TUL.
Right. Think of the TUL as the ideological incubator here. By 1928, their collaboration helps establish the Marine Workers Progressive League, the MWPL.
Which eventually, after all this structural shuffling, leads to the creation of the MWIU in 1930.
Birthed by yet another overarching group, the Trade Union Unity League, or the TUOL.
So we have this constantly shifting landscape of leagues and committees.
It's a lot to track.
It is. And if Mink is tasked with organizing the workers on the actual docks, how does he navigate that kind of bureaucratic, fractured leadership?
What's fascinating here is the underlying political drama that necessitates all of these changing organizations.
Right.
Between 1928 and 1929, the Communist Party USA was basically tearing itself apart with severe factional infighting.
You had different ideological camps forming behind different prominent leaders.
Specifically, James P. Cannon, J. Love Stone, and William Z. Foster.
And because the leadership is completely fractured, the actual organizing work on the waterfront essentially stalls.
Yeah. Mink just has to lay low. He cannot effectively organize dock workers when the national leadership is paralyzed by internal power struggles.
Which means the workers are left waiting for direction while the leadership argues in rooms in New York. So how does that deadlock finally break?
It breaks through direct top-down intervention. In 1929, Joseph Stalin himself steps in.
Wow!
Yeah, and he officially appoints William Z. Foster as the head of the CPUSA.
So by ending the factional war from Moscow, Stalin consolidates power.
Exactly. And that decision trickles all the way down to the American docks. Once Foster is officially in charge, Mink finally has the green light to resume his efforts with the Marine workers in earnest.
And that structural alignment leads directly to a massive milestone. On April 26th and 27th of 1930, a convention is called in New York by the Marine Workers League of New York.
Right.
This gathering is the official birthplace of the Marine Workers Industrial Union of the USA.
And historical records note this wasn't just a sudden gathering. It was the culmination of several coastal conventions that had been taking place between 1928 and 1930.
The 1930 convention in New York is critical because it formalized their entire operation. I mean, they adopted an official constitution.
They took a very public stance,
Yeah.
openly supporting the USSR.
Furthermore, they elected 3 delegates to attend the Fifth World Congress of the Red International of Labor Unions.
Also known as the Profintern.
Right. And just to trace that hierarchy for you, the Profintern itself was the labor arm of the Communist International, or the Comintern.
The idea of a convention in New York City, directly electing delegates to send across the world to a Soviet-aligned Congress, that is a sharp departure from traditional localized trade unionism.
It really is. The records show the MWIU openly affiliated with the Trade Union Unity League, the TUL, though there's another historical account suggesting they actually bypassed the TUL entirely.
Yes, and affiliated directly with the Profintern's Red International of Transport Workers.
Right, and that alternative affiliation path was routed through an organization called the International Seamen and Harbors Workers Union, or the ISH, which operated out of Hamburg, Germany.
Regardless of which exact paperwork path they took, the core alignment is undeniable. They are actively plugging American dock workers directly into a massive, globally coordinated apparatus.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's analyze the geographical footprint of this union.
It's massive.
When we think of a trade union in the 1930s, the assumption is usually a regional operation, right? Like a local chapter.
Sure, normally.
But the logistics required to maintain the MWIU's network in an era before digital communication are incredibly complex.
It completely redefines the logistical boundaries of what a union could attempt to be at that time.
They set up their headquarters at 410 Broad Street in New York City. And from there, they established a domestic presence that hit almost every major coast.
Buffalo, Boston, Philadelphia,
Baltimore, New Orleans, Houston,
San Pedro, San Francisco,
Sacramento, and Seattle. I mean, that alone requires immense coordination. But how did they push this beyond the American borders?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the overseas presence reveals the true strategic ambition of the MWRU.
They didn't just stay in the U.S.
Not at all. They established overseas offices in London, Newcastle, Bordeaux,
Copenhagen, Antwerp, Hamburg.
Bremen, Leningrad, Archangel, and Vladivostok.
Having active outposts and strategic global choke points like Hamburg and Vladivostok, that means they weren't just thinking about American labor disputes, they were looking at the entire board.
Precisely. Operating in major global ports meant they were actively attempting to organize across the primary international shipping lanes.
They leaned heavily into that affiliation with the ISH in Germany.
They viewed the struggles of the marine workers not as isolated, local disputes over hourly wages, but as interconnected battles within a global ideological framework.
And to keep that sprawling network connected, they utilized their own publication, the Marine Workers' Voice.
Which they inherited from the Marine Workers League of the TUL.
Right. But beyond the publications and the international offices, the organization was driven by some highly compelling figures. We mentioned George Mink, but the union was shaped by a variety of distinct personalities.
You had Roy Hudson serving as the National MWIU Secretary.
And Al Lannon working as an organizer.
You also see the early involvement of figures who would later become massive names in the broader American labor movement.
Like Joe Curran.
Exactly. Joe Curran was an MWIU member who eventually went on to become the president of the National Maritime Union, or the NMU.
Hayes Jones was another member who later became the editor of The Lake, the newsletter for the NMU.
And Ferdinand Smith was also a prominent member during this time.
But it wasn't a perfect monolith either. The records show internal friction. Like organizer Harry Hines explicitly disagreeing with another key figure, Samuel Adams Dorsey.
It paints a picture of a complex organization made up of very passionate, sometimes conflicting personalities trying to steer a massive ship.
Which is exactly the reality of trying to unite thousands of independent, fiercely strong-willed maritime workers under a highly rigid ideological banner.
There will always be tension between the theoretical directives coming from the top and the practical realities the organizers face on the ground.
And that tension between ideology and reality brings us to the official slogan of the MWIU.
This is a crucial point.
This is where their political framework meets the concrete reality of the 1930s waterfront. Their official slogan was, quote, "full economic, social, and political equality for whites, Negroes, and Asiatics," end quote.
We really need to properly contextualize that statement to understand its weight. In the early 1930s, the United States was deeply systemically segregated.
Yes.
To have a labor union put down in writing as their primary official slogan, a demand for radical, total economic, social, and political racial equality was fiercely progressive.
It challenged the fundamental societal structure of the era. They are demanding a complete restructuring of societal equality on the waterfront.
But writing a progressive slogan in a New York office is very different from enforcing it.
Right.
This raises an important question. How did these grand progressive ideals and these massive international affiliations actually translate to the physical docks?
Did they remain purely theoretical?
Or did the MWIU prove capable of taking direct action?
Well, the historical accounts show they absolutely took direct action. The most prominent example is the massive 1934 West Coast waterfront strike.
A defining, brutal labor battle of the era.
And the MWIU was deeply involved. Crucially, they didn't isolate themselves. They joined forces on the picket lines with other major groups.
Specifically, the International Seamen's Union and the Marine Transport Workers.
The MTW, which was a branch of the Industrial Workers of the World, or the IWW.
That operational collaboration is a vital detail. It demonstrates that despite their specific Soviet affiliations and their origins in CPUSA factionalism, when it came time to fight for the actual workers on the docks in 1934, they were willing and able to stand shoulder to shoulder with other major non-communist labor organizations.
They successfully mobilized their members, people like Joe Curran, Hayes Jones, and Ferdinand Smith, to hold the line during one of the most contentious, high-stakes strikes in American history.
It was a crucible that shaped future labor leaders.
So they build this massive momentum. By 1935, they have grown to 14,000 members.
They have established a logistical network from Sacramento to the Soviet Union.
They have just helped execute a historic West Coast strike. They appear to be a rising powerhouse in maritime labor. So what does this all mean?
Where does this trajectory take them?
It takes them to one of the most sudden, controversial endings in labor history. In 1935, just 5 years after that ambitious founding convention in New York, the MWIU is abruptly terminated.
Out of nowhere.
Roy Hudson, the ranking MWIU official and national secretary, single-handedly dissolves the union.
He dissolves an organization of 14,000 active workers entirely on his own authority.
Without a single vote from the membership. There is no convention called to discuss it, no democratic process, and no ballot cast. He simply ends it.
Immediately after the dissolution, the International Seamen's Union of America succeeds to it, effectively absorbing the remnants of the organization.
The profound irony of this conclusion is staggering.
Think back to their foundational principles. This was an organization that campaigned on a slogan of radical equality for all workers.
Right. They fought for the voice and the rights of the everyday sailor and docker.
And yet, their ultimate fate was decided overnight in a completely top-down authoritarian maneuver by a single official. The rank-and-file members, all 14,000 of them who stood on the picket lines, had absolutely no say in the termination of their own union.
Building a grassroots, globe-spanning organization demanding equality, only to dismantle it with the stroke of a pen from the top, fundamentally changes how we view their operational structure.
It perfectly illustrates the complex, inherently contradictory nature of these ideologically driven organizations during this era. Hudson didn't just wake up and arbitrarily decide to end the union.
No, it was calculated.
This move reflects how heavily tethered local American labor was to the shifting global strategies of their international affiliates. The directives from the top leadership, whether in New York or Moscow, superseded anti-democratic input from the actual workers who made up the lifeblood of the union.
When the broader strategic priorities shifted, the MWIU was simply erased from the board.
But despite that abrupt and highly controversial end, the echoes of the MWIU have lasted for decades.
In 1963, a man named Nelson Bruce helped found the Marine Workers Historical Association.
And a key part of that association's work was actively preserving the records of the MWIU.
That preservation is vital for understanding an organization that was dismantled so quickly and quietly from the top.
We also have critical personal accounts that survived. In 1980, the American writer George Morris recorded an extensive oral history detailing his own recollections of the MWIU during that monumental 1934 strike.
Primary sources like that allow us to understand the granular reality of the movement far beyond the high-level political maneuvering.
And perhaps the most tangible piece of their legacy exists right now. Today, the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, operates a union that bears almost the exact same name.
It's called the Marine Workers Industrial Union 51.
It serves as a living echo of that original 1930 convention. It proves that while the specific Soviet-aligned political structure of the 1930s MWIU was highly temporary, the underlying demand for that kind of fierce industrial maritime organization never truly disappeared from the waterfront.
It is an unbelievable narrative to trace. We are looking at a 5-year experiment that completely defied standard labor union boundaries.
They gathered 14,000 workers.
They stretched their physical presence across the Atlantic and the Pacific.
They championed fiercely progressive racial equality during the segregated 1930s.
And then, at the height of their momentum, they vanished overnight without a single ballot ever being cast by the workers themselves.
For you, as someone who seeks to understand the deep undercurrents of history rather than just the surface-level events, this deep dive is incredibly valuable.
Exactly.
It serves as a stark reminder that local movements and the everyday jobs of everyday people are frequently tied directly to massive, sweeping currents of global geopolitics.
An American sailor striking for better conditions in San Francisco in 1934 was simultaneously a participant in a local labor dispute and a piece in a much larger ideological chess match involving CPUSA factionalism and the shifting global priorities of the Comintern.
The local reality and the global strategy are always intricately intertwined.
That deep interconnection is exactly why we wanted to extract this story for you today. We want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
We have just examined how an organization of 14,000 dedicated, striking workers spread across the globe could be completely dissolved overnight by a single individual without a democratic vote.
If that kind of overnight erasure is possible, how secure are the modern institutions and structures that we blindly assume are permanent today?
It certainly challenges our assumptions about the durability of the organizations we rely on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We thoroughly enjoyed analyzing this dense, fascinating history for you, and we hope you walk away with a totally new perspective on the invisible frameworks that tie our local world to global history.
We will catch you next time.